The scent of sawdust was the only perfume Leo cared for. It clung to his clothes, coated his hands, and settled into the creases of his worn work boots. For the last 11 months, the towering red oak in his backyard had been his temple, his canvas, and his sanctuary. He didn't just build a treehouse. He built a monument. A sprawling 2-story structure with a wraparound deck, a rope bridge that led to a secondary platform, and a proper, shingled roof that gleamed in the afternoon sun. It was a cathedral of childhood dreams, forged with adult hands, and a grief that still felt raw. This wasn't a slapdash weekend project. Every joint was a mortise and tenon, every beam was reinforced steel, and the entire structure was anchored not with lag bolts that would wound the tree, but with treehouse attachment bolts, tabs, a system Leo had spent weeks researching and importing. It was a feat of engineering, a tribute to the man who taught him to love the grain of wood, his father. His dad, a master carpenter, had passed 2 years ago, and building this was how Leo processed the silence he had left behind. From his perch on the upper deck, Leo gazed out over the manicured suburban kingdom he called home. Every lawn was a perfectly manicured carpet of green, every bush a geometrically perfect cube. It was a world of meticulous order, where anything that deviated from the standard was seen not as unique, but as a flaw. And his treehouse, a beautiful, wild anomaly, was a glaring flaw in the eyes of his neighbor, Brenda. Brenda lived in the house directly behind his, a pristine white colonial with not a single blade of grass out of place. She was an unappointed steward of the neighborhood, a self-anointed queen of the cul-de-sac. Leo had heard the whispers, seen the way she would stop her golf cart-sized electric scooter, stare at his project, and then disappear back into her fortress. The silence was the worst part. He almost wished she would come over and complain, just to get it out of the way. The wish was granted on a Tuesday. Leo was putting the finishing touches on the deck railings when he heard the familiar, sharp squeal of Brenda's scooter stopping abruptly below. He peered down to see her, dressed in a perfectly tailored pantsuit, a crisp white purse clutched in her hand. Her head was tilted back, her chin thrust forward, a look of pure, unadulterated disapproval etched on her face. "Leo!" she called up, her voice a piercing shriek. "What in the world is that monstrosity?" Leo sighed, a cloud of dusty breath in the humid air. He climbed down the ladder, landing softly on the ground. "It's a treehouse, Brenda. A pretty well-built one, if I do say so myself." "Well-built?" she scoffed, her gaze sweeping over the structure as if searching for a cockroach. "It's an eyesore, Leo. And frankly, I'm quite concerned about its structural integrity. Have you had it inspected? What about the city ordinances? I'm quite certain there are rules about structures this substantial. It's a safety hazard. What if a child were to get hurt?" "Brenda, it's safer than your back porch," Leo said, his patience wearing thin. He tried to keep the tremor from his voice. This was more than a structure. It was a part of him. "I've engineered everything. The plans are to scale. I've got every single receipt, every measurement, every detail logged in a binder. It's a monument, not a jungle gym." "A monument to what? Negligence?" she shot back, her lips a thin line. "I've already consulted with my husband, a very well-regarded lawyer. He says you're on shaky legal ground. I suggest you tear it down before someone gets hurt, for the good of the neighborhood." With that, she turned her scooter around and zipped off, leaving a plume of electric scooter exhaust and a palpable sense of dread in her wake. Leo watched her go, the words, "shaky legal ground," echoing in his head. The joy of building, which had been his only solace, curdled into anxiety. He went inside and found his wife, Sarah, in the kitchen, meticulously meal prepping for the week. "She came over," he said, dropping into a chair. Sarah didn't even have to ask who she was. "What did she say this time?" "She called it a monstrosity, and a safety hazard," said her husband. The very well-regarded lawyer says I'm on shaky legal ground. "This is getting serious, Sarah." "So what?" Sarah said, grabbing a cutting board and a knife. "So she has a lawyer husband. You've got a binder full of proof. You built that thing by the book. You're not doing anything wrong." "But she's right about the ordinances," Leo said, his voice quiet. He pulled out the thick, well-worn binder from the shelf. "I've read them. A residential accessory structure can't be more than 15 feet high. Mine is 17. I had to build it that high to get past the first major branch." Sarah stopped cutting. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the refrigerator. 17? Leo, why didn't? The silver watering can lay on Carol Pinter's perfect lawn like a discarded weapon. The water, a dark, spreading stain on the emerald grass, was the only thing moving. For a full minute, Carol was a statue of pure disbelief. Her jaw was slack, the fine lines around her eyes etched deeper by a shock so profound it had frozen her in place. The 10-ton slab of olive drab steel, a monument to defiance, sat in Alex's driveway. Its massive treads, designed to crush earth and concrete, rested harmlessly on the smooth, gray surface. The barrel pointed impotently at the sky, a final, absurd touch of an artist's signature. A few yards away, a little girl named Lily, no older than 7, pointed a tiny finger at the machine. "Mommy!" she shrieked, her voice a mix of terror and wonder. "It's a tank!" Her mother, a woman who had once been on Carol's side, simply shook her head and herded her daughter back inside, a small, knowing smile on her lips. Alex leaned against the side of his truck, a silent observer. The flatbed rumbled away, leaving the two protagonists to face the aftermath. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The tank said everything. It was the ultimate, unassailable retort to a lifetime of small-minded tyranny. Carol finally found her voice, a strained, reedy whisper that quickly escalated into a high-pitched shriek. "Alex! What is the meaning of this?" She stomped across the lawn, her perfectly manicured fingernails clenched into fists. You can't put that thing here. It's a violation. It's a public nuisance." Alex pushed himself off the truck, his face a mask of calm, cold resolve. "Section 7.4 of the HOA bylaws," he said, his voice flat and even. "It states that a vehicle must not be in a state of disrepair and must align with the community's aesthetic standards. My truck, according to you and the board, failed on both counts. This," he gestured to the tank, "is not a vehicle. It's a military artifact. It has no engine, no license plates, and it's not street legal. It is a historical monument." Carol's eyes narrowed. "Don't be ridiculous. It has treads and a barrel. It's an eyesore. A terrifying, dangerous eyesore. Did you get a letter from the HOA about my truck being dangerous?" Alex asked, a sliver of a smile playing on his lips. "I only got one about it being an eyesore. I've addressed that. If you think this isn't aesthetically pleasing, you're welcome to bring it up with the board. I've done my due diligence." He walked past her, the silence of the street now broken only by the chirping of birds and the faint whir of Carol's lawn sprinklers. He went inside, leaving Carol alone with the monster she had summoned. The emergency meeting was called for that very night. Alex and Sarah dressed in their finest casual wear, a silent protest against the stiff-collared tyranny of the board. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a place Alex had never been. The air was thick with the scent of cheap coffee and righteous indignation. The board members were all there, a collection of retired businessmen, stay-at-home parents, and a particularly stern-looking woman with a clipboard. At the head of the table sat Richard Miller, the board president and a known ally of Carol. Richard cleared his throat, a sound that was supposed to command authority, but just came off as a nervous tick. "Alex, thank you for coming on such short notice. We've all been made aware of the situation at your residence." Alex nodded, his face impassive. "The tank?" "Yes, the tank," Richard said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We feel this is a clear and flagrant violation of community standards. We are proposing a fine of $100 per day and immediate removal." "On what grounds?" Alex asked, his tone still perfectly even. Richard's face reddened. "On the grounds that it is a public hazard. A tank parked on a residential driveway. It's a liability. What if a child climbs on it and falls?" "The tank is decommissioned," Alex said calmly. "The barrel is welded shut, the engines are gone, and it's completely inert. It's a piece of static art, no different than a garden gnome. A very large garden gnome." A few muffled snickers came from the back of the room. Carol shot daggers at the culprits. "Furthermore," Alex continued, pulling a stack of papers from a folder, "I consulted the city's zoning regulations and the local ordinance. It is perfectly legal to park a historical vehicle on a private driveway as long as it is registered as such with the DMV, which it is." He slid a copy of the registration and a letter from the state's historical society across the table. "And before you say anything about it being an eyesore, the only letter I received from this board was regarding my truck. The truck is now safely in my garage, out of view. I have complied with your request." The board members looked at each other, a collective wave of confusion. The air in the clubhouse parking lot was thin, cold, and 1,000 degrees quieter than the suffocating tension of the meeting room. Alex and Sarah walked to their car in a silence that was far more deafening than any of Richard Miller's threats. The initial flush of righteous victory had drained from Alex's veins, leaving behind a hollow, icy dread. Richard's last words echoed in his head, a venomous promise that had nothing to do with bylaws and everything to do with a personal vendetta. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice low and tight with a barely contained fury. "Your place of employment, Alex. He said he was going to call your job." Alex unlocked the car, the beep of the remote sounding impossibly loud in the still night. "He's bluffing," he said, but the words felt like ashes on his tongue. He had never been good at lying, especially to her. "Is he?" Sarah's eyes were wide and filled with a terror that clawed at Alex's chest. "You saw his face. That wasn't a bluff. He wants to hurt you. This isn't about the tank anymore. It's about revenge." Alex started the car, the engine a low, comforting hum against the storm brewing inside the vehicle. "He can't do anything. What's he going to say? My neighbor parked a tank in his driveway, and I don't like it. It's absurd. They'll laugh at him." "They won't laugh, Alex," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "They'll listen. It's a tank. In a suburban neighborhood. Do you know how that sounds? He'll make you sound unhinged. You're the one who has to show up to the office every day, not him. What if they decide you're too much of a liability?" The truth of her words hung in the air, thick and heavy. He was a manager at a mid-sized engineering firm. They valued stability, predictability. A man who parked a decommissioned military vehicle in his driveway despite his neighbors was anything but stable. He had taken a calculated risk, but he had miscalculated the level of his opponent's pettiness. He had underestimated how far Richard would go to win. The next few days were a waking nightmare. Alex went to work, his stomach in knots every time his phone rang. He found himself flinching at the sight of an unfamiliar email address in his inbox. At home, the tank stood as a silent, monolithic reminder of the battle he had started. The initial shock from the neighbors had worn off, replaced by a subtle, creeping hostility. The little smiles and curious waves from the first day were gone. Now, People avoided his eyes when he was in the driveway. He saw Carol and Richard talking to neighbors on their front lawns, their gestures animated, their glances in his direction long and full of malicious glee. He could almost hear the whispered words, "He's unhinged, a public hazard, what's next?" His wife, Sarah, was a fortress of silent anxiety. She had stopped talking about the tank, or the HOA, or Richard. She just held him a little longer in the mornings, and kept a pot of coffee on the burner late into the night. The emotional strain was a physical weight on their family. The tank was a symbol of triumph to Alex, but to Sarah, it was a ticking time bomb. Then, on a Friday afternoon, as Alex was preparing to leave work, his phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. He answered it, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Alex Lawson?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "This is Brenda Simmons from Human Resources. Do you have a moment to talk?" The words hit him like a physical blow. The call had come. The bluff was real. He felt the blood drain from his face, and his knuckles went white as he gripped the phone. "Yes, Brenda, I do. We've received a number of complaints," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "They've all been directed through our corporate liaison office, citing your property." She paused, the weight of the unspoken word, tank, hanging between them. "The concerns are about a potential negative impact on the company's public image and the perception of our employees. It's been described as disruptive and unbecoming conduct outside of work. I'm sure you understand the severity of this." Alex's mind raced. "Brenda, this is a personal matter. It's a petty dispute with my HOA. I followed all the regulations. The vehicle is a historical monument. It's not illegal, and it's not a public hazard." "That may be," Brenda said, her voice hardening slightly. "But the perception is. We've had calls from people claiming to be local news reporters. This is creating a distraction, Alex. It's not something we can ignore. So what are you saying?" Alex's voice was a low growl of impotent rage. "That I have to move it? That I have to give in to a bully and his ridiculous rules or lose my job?" "We're not saying that, Alex," Brenda replied, a hint of something cold and final in her tone. "We're asking you to consider the best course of action for your future at this company. We'll be in touch on Monday to discuss this further." The line "we." The fury that had replaced Alex's fear was a cold, sharp thing, a blade honed by injustice. He drove home in a daze, the dread so profound it was a physical ache. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw the tank. Its massive, inert form felt less like a monument to his defiance and more like a tombstone for his career. But then, as he looked up, he saw Carol Pinter in her living room window, a small, cruel smile on her face. It was the smile of a winner, a smile that said she knew exactly what had happened. And in that moment, the fear vanished, replaced by a volcanic, white-hot fury. He had fought their game and won, only to have them change the rules. Now, he would change the game entirely. He would make the battle public. He would not just win. He would make sure everyone knew exactly who he had won against. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. He knew a few friends who worked in media. He was done being polite. He was going to put the entire story on a billboard, metaphorically and literally, for the whole world to see. The conversation with Mark, his old college friend and now an investigative journalist for a local paper, was short and to the point. Alex spoke quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush of indignation and cold, hard facts. He laid out the timeline. The first letter about his truck, the boilerplate rejection of his polite email, the legal loophole he found, the absurd tank delivery, and finally, the thinly veiled threat to his career. Mark listened, his silence a sign of his rapt attention. "A tank, Alex? You bought a tank?" he finally said, a low chuckle in his voice. This is pure gold. The bylaws, the pettiness, the career threat. It's a perfect story. The little guy against the absurd power of the HOA. I love it. I don't need you to love it, Mark. I need you to print it. I need you to expose them. I'll do you one better, Mark said, his tone shifting from amusement to professional intensity. Give me all the emails, the letters, the bylaw codes, everything. I'll write a piece for the paper, but I'm also going to push it to the online desk. This is a viral story, man. This is a story for the internet. The next morning, an article titled, Tank vs. Karen, a homeowner's epic stand against HOA tyranny, went live on the local paper's website. It was an objective piece, a dry recounting of the facts, but the title and the accompanying photo of the menacing tank on a perfectly manicured suburban driveway told a story of its own. Within an hour, the first comments appeared. This is the most American thing I've ever heard. Give this man a medal. HOA power trips are out of control. This guy is my hero. As an HOA board member, I can attest to the fact that this is not how it works. This man is a lunatic. This one was quickly met with 50 downvotes and an onslaught of sarcastic replies. By noon, the article had been shared 1,000 times. By the end of the day, it was a social media sensation. The phrase, Tank vs. Karen, was trending on Twitter. People from all over the country were commenting, sharing their own horror stories of petty HOA rules and power-hungry board members. The tank at Alex's driveway had become a symbol of a larger, collective frustration. He sat on his couch, watching the digital firestorm he had created. He saw memes, photoshopped images of his tank rolling over Carol's petunias, and even a fan account dedicated to the Oakwood Heights tank. Sarah, who had initially been filled with dread, now sat next to him, a look of shocked fascination on her face. My God, she whispered, scrolling through the comments. People are incredible. There's a guy in Ohio who said he's mailing us $100 to help with legal fees. The knock on the door came at 7 p.m. It was Richard Miller and Carol Pinter, their faces pale with a mixture of rage and terror. Richard held a crumpled printout of the article in his hand. What have you done? Carol shrieked, her voice thin with hysteria. This is defamation. We're being harassed. My phone won't stop ringing. The truth is not defamation, Alex said calmly, opening the door wider. I told the story. I used your own words and your own letters. It's all right here. He gestured to the articles pulled up on his tablet. You threatened my job, Richard. You decided to take a small, petty dispute and make it a matter of my livelihood. Now, I have done the same. I have made your pettiness a matter of public record. You started a war of attrition, but I am fighting a different kind of war. And you're not prepared for it. Richard's face was beet red. We will take legal action against you. You and your libelous journalist friend. Go ahead, Alex said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I have nothing left to lose. My company is already looking for a reason to fire me, so a frivolous lawsuit from my HOA is just one more thing on the pile. But I will fight you in court. And win. The humiliation was a physical thing. Carol Pinter stood at the end of her driveway, a perfectly coiffed, middle-aged woman staring at a video screen. The screen in her hand showed a replay of a local news report. The reporter, with a smile that was a little too wide, had just finished a segment titled, Homeowners Tankful Revenge. The camera had panned from the reporter's face to a shot of Alex's house and the imposing tank, and then finally to Carol herself, standing in her driveway, her mouth open in a soundless shriek. The on-screen graphic at the bottom read, Karen Pinter, HOA board member, declined to comment. The humiliation was a physical thing. It made her face burn and her hands shake. She heard a car door slam behind her, and spun around to see Richard Miller, his face a grim mask, walking towards her. "I told you this would happen, Carol," he said, his voice a low growl of pure anger. "I told you he was dangerous. This isn't my fault, Richard. He's a lunatic. He's harassing me. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. They're calling me a Karen," she wailed. Richard scoffed. "You gave him the ammunition. You and your damn truck rule. You had to get personal. You had to call his job, didn't you?" Carol stammered. I was trying to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. The rest of the board agrees with me. The rest of the board is in hiding," Richard said, his voice cold. "They're all getting calls, too. You've made us a laughingstock. This isn't about your garden or his truck anymore. It's a war. Then we have to win," Carol said, her voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. "We have to show him that he can't get away with this. He thinks he's a hero? We'll make him a pariah. We'll make him regret the day he ever bought a house in this community." Alex, meanwhile, was basking in the unaccustomed glow of public approval. Emails poured in, messages on social media, even a few handwritten letters. A man from Oregon who had been fighting a similar battle with his own HOA sent him a $1,000 cashier's check with a note that read, "For the legal fund. Don't let the bastards win." Alex had a small, uneasy smile on his face as he showed the check to Sarah. She, too, had started to see the humor in the situation. The tank, which had once felt like a symbol of dread, now felt like a badge of honor. But the real-world consequences were still looming. The call from Brenda Simmons at work came on Monday morning. "Alex, we've been monitoring this situation," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "The social media attention has been considerable. We've had a lot of questions about whether your actions reflect the values of the company. It's created a significant distraction for our employees, our clients, and our leadership. This is a very serious matter." Alex felt a knot form in his stomach. "Brenda, I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong. My private life is my own. I haven't done anything illegal. In fact, I'm being harassed by a bully and his cronies. I am the victim here, not the aggressor." "Perhaps," she said, the word a blade of ice. "But that is a matter for the courts to decide. Our concern is for the company's reputation. We've come to a decision. We are placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into your conduct and its impact on the company. We will be in touch." The line went dead. Alex sat there, the phone in his hand, a cold dread seeping back into his bones. His public victory had come with a price. He was suspended. His livelihood was on the line. He felt the weight of the tank on his driveway once again, no longer a symbol of defiance, but a leaden weight of consequence. He drove home, his mind a blur of anger and fear. He had to tell Sarah. The news would devastate her. He pulled into his driveway, and the sight of the tank, now a known symbol of his rebellion, just filled him with impotent fury. As he was getting out of his car, a pristine white mail truck pulled up. The mailman, a friendly-looking older man, walked up to his front door, a solemn expression on his face. He held a large manila envelope in his hand. "Alex Lawson?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Yes," Alex said, his voice a low growl. "This is for you," the mailman said, handing him the envelope. "Certified mail. You have to sign for it." Alex's hand trembled as he signed the clipboard. He took the envelope, its contents feeling impossibly heavy. He ripped it open and pulled out the contents. There, in a thick stack of papers, was a letter. The letterhead was from a high-powered law firm in the city. The letter was addressed to him, and the subject line was a single, devastating sentence. "Notice of intent to file legal action, public nuisance, damages, and malicious harassment. He read it twice, his brain struggling to process the words. He was being sued. The HOA was suing him. They were calling the Tanka. PU.